Hey everyone, and welcome to our podcast, IR in Focus. I'm your host, Carmen Lilly, and today I have a very exciting guest who I've met at various conferences and who most recently was honored by the National Investor Relations Institute as a rising leader under 40. Welcome, Miranda Villavicencio, and congratulations on being recognized for your work at Ball Corporation.
Thank you so much, Carmen. I'm so happy to be here, and I have met you at many conferences, and every time it's great to get to know you more, and I hope you had a great summer.
Yeah, summer is going well. Staying cool. How's your summer been?
Pretty good. This was my first summer officially just being a working adult, and it definitely feels different, and I like it. I can do whatever I want when I get home. I don't have to go and read 5 chapters in a book or write a paper.
That's great. That's great. So before we dive into our conversation, I just wanted to describe for our listeners your additional credentials. When I went through your bio, I was like, wow, you've already done so much, and that should be recognized and honored. So currently, Miranda is thriving in her role as an investor relations analyst at Ball Corporation, which is based in Westminster, Colorado. She started her work in IR as an intern with Ball, which led to a seamless transition into a full-time position while simultaneously pursuing her master's degree. Outside of her professional endeavors, she actively engages in industry associations and organizations, and she currently serves as co-sponsorship chair for the Rocky Mountain chapter of the National Investor Relations Institute. And she contributes to the sustainable financial health of the local chapter through engagement with their sponsors on programs and events. Miranda holds a Master of Arts in Global Finance, Trade, and Economic Integration from the Joseph Corbel School of International Studies from the University of Denver, and with a concentration in international business. Also, I see here that you got your Bachelor of Arts in International Affairs with a minor in History and Economics from the University of Northern Colorado. Like I said, you have a very hefty resume already.
Thank you.
And I wanted to start with you. So in our past conversations around conferences, I recall you telling me that you were one of the few people who pursued a job in this industry or like targeted this role rather than like moving from a different field, say corporate finance or treasury. So tell me a little bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I suppose I'll start with my original view on what I thought I was going to be doing, kind of when I started my undergrad and then how I ended up in IR. So as you mentioned, I got my undergrad in international affairs because I was very interested in becoming a public servant through working as a diplomat or working for an agency. And I knew that just an undergraduate degree was probably not enough. So I sought out distinguished schools of international affairs. And the University of Denver was a great and easy choice because I did not want to move from beautiful Colorado. And they have a wonderful, renowned program. So I started my master's there 3 months after the pandemic started. So that changed the format in which I took classes and interacted with peers. Going into my second year, you have to do an internship. So while I was applying to internships, I saw investor relations intern at Ball Corporation, which growing up in Colorado, I knew them very well. And I thought, well, I'm definitely not qualified and it's out of my league, but I applied anyways. And thankfully, it was a good match. And once I started my internship, I really learned what investor relations is as a department and what they bring to a company. And through attending my first Neary National Conference is when I really realized that I started in IR in a bit of a non-traditional way, as most people come from inside the business, as you stated, or from the street. So I feel extremely lucky to have found this internship and now, of course, my job.
We talk at conferences all the time when we ask people like what their backgrounds are. We get a lot of sell-side analysts, right? So definitely you have a different background than we see from a lot of the traditional IR professionals. What have you found to be the hardest transition from college to your IR role at Ball?
Yeah. So again, I think I feel extremely lucky to have landed my internship at Ball because those positions are extremely rare. And I think Ball's strategy of not just hiring to get some extra work done in actually hiring an intern with the intent of hiring them as a full-time position is a great company strategy. And I think actually the hardest transition didn't actually happen, which I think what that would have been is I would have been overwhelmed and stressed, right? Trying to figure out being an adult in the working world, learning a new company and how it operates, and also my responsibility and role. But it was quelled because of how Ball does their internship program because I was developed right from the start. And at the end of my internship, I was offered a full-time position that I then started right away, but they were very conscious of, me also doing my master's at the same time. So it was really just getting me up to speed, learning as much as possible on my own sort of agenda and terms that fit well with my education. And so I really think that would have been the hardest transition, but I had such a wonderful team and company that was very supportive of, knowing that I was working and also finishing my master's. And then once I graduated, I think now it's like go, 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 go time, Now I have to actually start, contributing and being an IR professional. And that 1 year of coming up to speed was amazing and was actually not as hard as I thought.
Yeah, that's great. Like, that's great that Ball was doing a internship, developing you, and then in hopes to transition you into a full-time employee. I see a lot of companies that will do, like you said, internships where they just have a lot of menial work that they need to get done, and a lot of busy work. This one sounds like, yeah, Ball Corp did a really good job in terms of like, yes, we want to invest in this person, bring them up to speed, and then offer them a full-time position. That's awesome. And so I see you received your master's in global finance, trade, and economic integration. So how much of that expertise in your master's have you been able to leverage in your IR role?
Sure, yeah. So going to an APSIA school, which is an acronym for the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, they specialize in public service. So I think it's served me very well in terms of learning the big picture of international relations and how truly global and interconnected we have created our economies, trading regimes, and politics. And this program at DU was made for people that want to pair the quantitative with the qualitative, which IR is very much both those things. And with this program, people usually are in that program because they have more of an inclination towards capital markets through a socially responsible lens. So I would also add that completing my master's in this degree opened up many doors for me in terms of my knowledge base, and also with the people and professionals in this degree program, I was challenged, which boded well for me starting in IR straight from school. So for the most part, I've realized that the best way to get a holistic picture of how things work, you have to pair both the theory and actual experience. And so that's what I'm enjoying most. I think my educational background was very broad and I learned a lot of really good things. And so now seeing that come alive and operating in a business is so cool to see.
Yeah. And you know what? You're explaining a little bit about you're trying to align your values and your education with, your job. And I don't see that a lot these days in terms of like when you think about the older professionals, when they're like, oh yeah, this is my job, this is my career, this is what I do. But it may not necessarily align with, the personal values. I think I see that a lot more with the younger generations, right? And so I wanted to ask here, when you think about, what you've learned and what you value, do you today practice social investing? So do you look at, when you have your own personal money to invest, do you look for corporations that align with your own values?
I think that is a great point. Us younger people really want to make sure we have that work-life balance. And so I think I'll speak to how I invest my time, and that certainly has to align with my personal values and goals. And I knew that if I worked for a corporation, it would have to be one that is progressive in their views in terms of sustainability, diversity, inclusion, and what they're working towards is aligned with scientifically and socially accepted goals. Because work is where we spend the majority of our time as adults. So it's very important for me to invest in a company that is also going to invest in my development, have a culture that's supportive and understanding. So that's how I would say I would socially invest when looking at businesses. And of course, I see myself here for a long time. And if I ever do look at other businesses, like that's definitely a criteria that I look for. And like you said, I think the younger generation definitely is top of mind for them.
hmm Yeah, I like how you answer that question instead of saying, "Oh, here's, monetary value of what I invest." I'm looking at it like for my time. Time is money in this case, right? And to your point, you want to be spending your time in a way that, aligns with your values and makes you happy at the end of the day. So, on that, in terms of the rise of sustainability practices, how has that kind of shifted and changed or even impacted your professional journey?
Yeah, so I would say in my current role at this company that's very focused on sustainability and in all realms and obviously in what we make as well. I've learned that I've been exposed to much more than if I worked for a different industry or perhaps even a different company. My company has been very focused on sustainability for decades and has kept up and is usually a first mover with the changing demands and expectations. So, building that acumen personally has been imperative. And I think my managers have done an amazing job of making it part of my job description. And with investors being more focused on sustainable practices, it has become part of the job, not just an added knowledge base or skill. And of course, we rely mostly on our sustainability experts and the work they do. And we work very closely with them to make sure everything we are communicating is consistent and we are showcasing our business accurately.
That's awesome. So Ball has its own sustainability group that you're very much intertwined with to make sure that your goals and your responsibilities and your targets are all aligned across and integrated within the corporation.
Exactly. It's such an integral part of the strategy of Ball. And like I said, it's been for decades. So our sustainability team is a pretty robust team of professionals. So it's definitely wonderful being able to rely on them for all the data and all the goals they set. And then we just get to communicate the wonderful work that everyone does.
That's great. Shifting gears just a little bit, let's talk a little bit about emerging technology. So definitely your generation, more so than most, has all of this technology literally at your fingertips. So there's like social media out there, there's large language models that you can now play with. I can see how maybe new technology can have a role in PR or a comm strategy, but curious about like which kind of technology that you use to either, be more proficient at your job or help communicate out company strategy.
So there are so many technologies and opportunities that help in attracting and retaining investors that I'm sure have started saving IR professionals so much time and from how it used to be done. Targeting has become more sophisticated and nuanced through the use of data and models, like you mentioned. And that can really be tailored to your business and strategy of the investment thesis of the investors now. Using research tools for market trends and in competitive intelligence is paramount. And through the use of some of these tools, information has become much more automated and streamlined, which of course is great and saves time. So we as an IR team are constantly assessing what technology we can leverage to save time and create a more robust and accurate landscape of our industry and market as a whole.
Nice. Would you say then you're kind of using a combination of all the technology that's out there, including like social media, large language models, all that stuff is integrated into your IR program?
Absolutely. And we also, of course, have a very robust comms team. So I know they leverage social media a lot. And of course, it's very nuanced and it's actually more for talent engagement and retainment and recruitment. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So in that case, do you think this technology that you have access to, it sounds like actually makes your job easier, but is there a flip side to that? Is there any sort of hurdles that you've had to overcome with this technology?
Sure. And I think with everything, right, it's twofold. So with technology, it's for sure twofold. And I think technology has drastically changed how much information we have at our fingertips, like you mentioned, and it's created a fuller picture of market trends. The use of data can help inform our message. It can help us track our own operational performance more accurately and create more opportunity to interact with our shareholders. Of course, however, with everything and how fast it's disseminated, 48 hours now is old news. So making sure that we're always in the loop of current events and trying to get ahead of a news headline that bots pick up and put into quant models is challenging. And of course, is not really something that's in our control, but technology is a wonderful thing. And I think the most important part is learning how to use it properly and tailoring it to your situation. But like you mentioned, I really do believe it's made everyone's job a lot easier.
Hmm. Yeah, I liked your comment around the availability expectations now, so you can communicate much better and more frequently with investors. But on the flip side, like you said, like 48 hours is a long time to like wait for an answer now. So you're like expected to be always available and have these answers at the ready. That's interesting. Yeah. In that instance where you might have to do some backtracking or explaining of an event that might have gotten out and, like you said, picked up by bots. So how do you like keep track of what information's out there about your company, and then either react or get ahead of anything that's in the public sphere?
And how I mentioned earlier and what technology we're using, it's that automation is just absolutely amazing. So just simple things as setting up alerts from websites or companies that we want to track. So then as soon as, it crosses their wire, we immediately know. Of course, all of it is within the humanly possible realm of 24 hours. So if, we're sleeping, like we wake up and it's even then, right, it's old news, right? It's been out for 5 hours while we were sleeping, but we still have to then get as much information as possible from all our sources that we have available to us. And also, of course, engaging with our comms team, who also have even more access to certain streams of information. And then just making sure like we then put out the message and context that is surrounding that information that came out to make sure that we are still driving the narrative is extremely important.
Yeah, that's a great point. Making sure that, it's part of your role as an investor relations professional is framing the message and making sure that the appropriate context is out there and that investors understand what you're trying to communicate. Yeah, that's great. What other thing around technology? So, you mentioned that your schooling was interrupted by COVID. A lot of folks, business travel was also interrupted by COVID. So now these days, how do you think about traveling in person and having in-person events versus using virtual engagements? Do you have like a number that you try to hit, or do you prefer in-person versus virtual? Like, how do you try to balance that?
Sure. So I started, like you said, my academic career, half of it was online, and then my internship at Bull, I started in the office, and there was maybe like 10 people in the office, and we had to wear masks. So there were minimal in-person investor interactions, and there were surely no in-person conferences. But really, since the beginning of this year, we're pretty much back to normal in-person events, meetings, conferences. And I do see that becoming more of the norm again. And we also, we're mandated back in the office 3 to 4 days a week. So I really think that's changing the landscape. And most of the feedback is, in-person events and conferences especially are just so much more fulfilling and engaging. So I really do feel we're pretty much back to normal again pre-COVID with events being in person.
I gotcha. Yeah, I would totally agree with the sentiment around in-person events. There's just something, energizing at being around other professionals, either listening to webinars or seminars, and then having the opportunity to kind of like decompress and kind of pick apart what you just learned and listened to. Also, what I would say with in-person events, it definitely forces me to be more social, right? Like I don't enjoy talking to people I like absolutely do not know anything about, but it makes me better at, that small talk and making connections. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So, okay. So you think that things have pretty much returned to normal, to pre-COVID levels, and that it'd be expected to continue.
Absolutely. And the one thing I do see is also having that virtual option. So then you can reach more people, right? You want to have your events in person, but why not also throw up a webinar, right? Like where people can join, and then you get, 1 or 200 more people on your call or conference. So I do think having both is now even better, but yeah, in-person events are back.
Are back, yes. And one other thing about virtual events, I always sign up for these, webinars, and then they're like, "Oh, it's going to be recorded. We'll send out the recording." And I never join
Exactly.
if they do that.
Yes. It totally gives you an excuse to be like, never mind.
Right. But with in person, you've prepared, you're there, you've bought your plane ticket or whatever it may be. You have to show up.
Totally.
Yeah. So we're almost out of time here. So let's get to one more question. So in last month's episode, we had a macro recap of the first half of the year, and we talked about some predictions for the back half of the year. So in your opinion, what is the most important issue that you're going to be keeping an eye on in the second half of the year?
I think what you said on your last podcast, that there are mixed signals, is right on the money. It's very true. I mean, we still see historically high inflation, while at the same time, people are still spending on eating out, traveling, and services, even though government fiscal stimulus has ended. Savings have become depleted, and people are taking on more debt to finance their current lifestyles. So there is also that looming restart of student loan payments, which is estimated to reduce consumer spending in the US by as much as $9 billion each month, or more than $100 billion a year, according to a report by Oxford Economics. So the most important issue is that people are not totally convinced that we're out of the woods yet on a recession, or that something major is going to disrupt the macroeconomic environment again materially. So I agree with what Chris said on your last episode, that the most important thing companies can do right now is deliver their message and their strategy consistently, and how they have positioned themselves for the future, but also reiterating how they are still staying true to their mission and vision. So just trying to create some stability and re-emphasizing foundations is extremely important when everything seems to be up in the air.
Mm-hmm. I love that point. Yeah, being proactive and making sure you're clear and concise in your communication. And because the markets are skittish right now, right? So you just need to be out there and making sure that you, again, are saying, I feel like working in a big corporation, it's a lot like, you say what you're going to say, you say it, and then you tell them what you said. And I imagine that your job is a lot like that, right? Just like reiterating the same message to make sure that it gets across.
Exactly. And then me, even like as a consumer, right? Like I'm still not totally convinced that inflation isn't gonna just spike up again. And I mean, right now gas is $4, right? And so I think on a personal level, that's still definitely the most important issue that I'm keeping an eye on, is how affordable or unaffordable are things going to continue to be.
Mm-hmm. Right. Hey, it's tough times ahead, I think, in the second half of the year. We'll see how we feel come Christmas and buying gifts and whatnot. Maybe people will just get homemade gifts this year.
Yeah, it's a DIY Christmas.
It's DIY. I need to learn how to make stuff. Though.
I know. Right?
Maybe I'll start
now.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, thank you so much, Miranda, for joining me today. And thank you to our listeners. That is all the time we have. To our listeners, I hope you found valuable insights throughout this discussion, and tune in next month. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you.